Good. I'm feeling good. Yeah, it's been an interesting year, so I'm just happy that it's coming together at the right time.
What are some of the things you've really been trying to work on over the last year?
My coach and I have worked a lot on just the jump into the takeoff. So that first jump off the ground, coming in consistently and aggressively, and so really jumping through that takeoff before getting upside down. I have a tendency to just kind of get picked up by the pole and go upside down. And that I'm trying to keep this as like non-pole vault friendly as possible for people to understand it that don't pole vault, but ideally you want to be a little more patient and powerful through the jump before the swing. And so that's really what we've been focusing on, and you have a bit more control in doing that. And to be honest, just getting used to the new poles. My poles broke in half a couple weeks ago, so this is an entirely new brand and they feel great. I'm really confident on them, but just getting them dialed in too, to know exactly what they're going to do at the trials is important as well.
Yeah, for all of us non-pole vaulters out here, what is the relationship like with your pole?
I mean, it's everything. It's your lifeline. You come to really trust your poles, and you come to trust how they're going to react. You know exactly what each pole is going to do, and so you know if you should go up one pole stiffer or two poles, or and so you build a relationship with the poles themselves. And so having that happen where they just were destroyed was a pretty horrible feeling. But the good thing is that poles across the board, no matter the brand, are pretty similar. There are definitely like some small differences that when you're fighting for centimeters might make a difference which one you pick, but for the most part it was nice to know. I got to try 2 other brands after my poles had broken, and all 3 are great, so it was nice to be able to choose what really I felt was best for me. And so yeah, it was interesting. It sucked a little bit at first, but I think it could be a blessing in disguise. And ultimately, I can now be on what I think will throw me the highest. So,
yeah. So from the silver linings committee, you're trying to say this could be an upgrade.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think it really could be awesome. I don't think many vaulters get to really run an experiment the way that I did, where I got exactly the competition poles that I need in a competition on your meet poles, because in practice we never quite get to as big or as stiff of poles as we would in competition, just with adrenaline and feeling good and running harder. And so it really was awesome because the 2 other pole brands sent me poles, and I got to try all 3 in the truest sort of experiment, I guess. I keep saying that word, but it's the best way I could have tried all 3 of them. And so it was really cool to be able to do that, where a lot of people don't get that opportunity or don't want to risk it. And I didn't really have anything to lose at that point. So it was like, might as well try.
So now you're all set. You've got your equipment set. You've been working on all your cues. You've been to the Olympic trials before. We talked to you before Rio, and I remember right then you said Tokyo 2020, I'm coming for you.
Yes.
What's different this time around?
So after I didn't make the team in 2016, I moved out to Washington State to start working with Brad Walker, who was a 2-time world champion, 2-time Olympian. He held the American record for years. He had just retired himself and was coaching at Washington State. And so I moved out there to start working with him. And then he moved to Atlanta a couple years ago. So the group followed him down here. And that's why I'm here now. But he totally changed me as a vaulter, mentally, physically, technically, emotionally. He was the first person that was able to teach me how to think on the runway, where before I would run down. I was fast enough and I was athletic enough that I was good. I was decent for sure. And I jumped well. But he took me from being a good vaulter to being a great vaulter. And he just totally reformed everything about me. But specifically the mindset and the mentality on the runway.
So you feel much more dialed in than you did when you think back to 2016?
Yes. Back then it was like hoping for the best kind of thing. Like I said, I would just run down and throw my hands up, wasn't fully in control of what I was doing. And I'd say that's the biggest difference is now I feel like I'm very much in control of what I'm doing. And obviously anything can happen. Pole vault is a very fickle event, so you never know. But with all the jumps that we've done and the way he has trained me to focus and think in a competition, I'm going in feeling better than I ever thought I could have, especially back in 2016.
That's amazing to hear. That's great. So let's talk about the pandemic a little bit. First, I understand that you yourself contracted COVID
Yes.
at the end of last year, and you felt its effects for some time. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was, I got sick early December, and the physical symptoms really didn't last that long. I would say my main symptom while I was sick was just a deep headache, a bad headache, deep congestion. I lost my taste and smell for about 10 days. Doctor said I had moderate symptoms, so it wasn't super mild, but it obviously wasn't extreme. So very thankful for that. But I did get my heart checked out afterwards, and physically I was pretty good to go quickly, but mentally, neurologically, the firing, my just telling my body what to do quickly with specifically the pole vault, you're running down and you have to make a split-second decision, jump, you make the choice as you're coming down, you see the takeoff and you're jumping, in a split second. It was like I couldn't tell my body what to do fast enough. It was like I couldn't process visually what was happening fast enough.
Wow.
And it was a horrible feeling. It was very unsettling, and months of just not knowing if pole vault was ever going to feel normal again or feel good again. It was so frustrating because my coach and I have worked so hard to, be so consistent and confident and on the runway. And he always says it's a choice. When you come down, you either choose to execute the things that you want to, or you don't. It's not as emotional as, a lot of people, myself included, make it out to be. And it was like, I just couldn't, my brain could not process and do what I was telling it to do and what I had worked so hard to get it to do. So it was a pretty frustrating several months. Gosh, my poor family and my boyfriend, just crying, sobbing to them. Like, I don't know if I can do it after this year and just handle it. Because when I was in college, I went through a really bad mental block, and it was as if I was going through this mental block all over again. And that's pretty much your worst nightmare as a vaulter. So thankfully we have come out on the other side, and I would say I'm about 95% better. I still can't train in the indoor facility we were at. It's just a little too dark in there, and the lighting definitely affects me. Doctors were saying that everything I was explaining was very similar to post-concussion symptoms. So I was going to a concussion clinic. But yeah, it's been an interesting year, and definitely not how I would have liked to train going into the Olympics, but you just, that is the sport, and you just got to roll with the punches. So
certainly, and obviously we've all seen some impacts from the pandemic, and just having that year delay as well. I'm sure, like, you think back to last summer when you thought all of this would be happening. Yeah. How did that impact you?
It worked actually in my favor. I always feel bad saying that, but I think it was actually the best thing that could have happened for my vaulting career. And I understand that's not how it was for everyone, but I was super disappointed when I heard the announcement, but it allowed me to get in training because our facility stayed open. We were just in this, small, the old abandoned warehouse in the middle of nowhere. So we were able to kind of stay in our bubble and keep training. And I was able to work on the technique and the things that we had been trying to do for years. And every preseason that I've had with my coach, I've gotten better and better. And sometimes when you then just go into competitions, you start to revert a little bit. And so just having nothing but training for months, a year, I was really able to hone in on what we were trying to do. And I've carried a lot of that into this year, so that even when I was feeling bad, the jumps that I took were still some of the best I had ever taken. So in weird ways, it was probably the best thing that could have happened for my jumping. But obviously I'm, I would much rather have it been the other way, but I just tried to make a better situation out of a not so great one.
Absolutely. Yeah. What will you look forward to, and what do you think you'll miss about the experience that you're hearing about in Tokyo without fans, without family?
Yeah, my family was planning on coming, so that is going to be a bummer. But when they announced that fans couldn't be in the stadium, I just said, "Please don't come. It's not worth it. I would be more stressed wondering where you were and what you were doing." And I know my mom just is constantly worried. Just as a mom, that's just how she is, and so I would be worried for her worrying in a different country. And so I'm definitely sad, but in a way, it's better just knowing, okay, this is how it's going to be, and this is what we're going to do. And to be honest, they're never really able to come to a lot of my international competitions, anyways. So it's definitely a bummer. I've always done better when family and friends have been there, but that's not to say I can't do well with them not being there. I know that they will be cheering me on. I've heard talks of maybe renting out a local bar in Olmsted Falls. So I don't know what the plan is, but I know that I have a pretty great support system, and they'll be cheering me on regardless. So
All right. Well, Yak and I want an invite to this bar party for sure. So don't leave us out. We want to be there cheering you on as well.
Yeah, it might be like 4 a.m. with the time change. I'm not sure.
Hey, we're flexible.
Yeah.
I know you lost your dad young too, Katie. Tell me about the ritual that you do before every jump.
So after he passed away, I just wrote dad on the inside of my track spike, and I always tap it before. I always say big jumps, but I think I'm starting to do it before every jump now. And it's just kind of a way to feel like he's still there and cheering me on. He was the most supportive. He found the high school club that I went to for years. It was an hour away, and he and my mom as well would drive me an hour each way twice a week in the summer, in the winter. And so I'm so lucky that I had him supporting me young in every sport, because that definitely gives me a motivation now to do it for him too. So I never I'm always thinking about him when I'm out there.
Well, as you said, you do it before big jumps, but at this point in your career, I think they all are big jumps, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why it's every jump. That's really neat, though. What club was it that you went to when you were in high school here?
It was in Bellevue, Ohio, so it was altitude headquarters. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was a really, really awesome club. I was very lucky to have some fine, knowledgeable coaches at my age. I was able to get a really solid foundation, so that was awesome. The Ashland track program is just one of the best. I went to a D1 university for 2 years and then transferred to Ashland, which is D2, and I thrived there. The head coach, Judd Logan, is one of the best. He just has an energy that you just want to do well when he's around. But my pole vault coach, Denny, I could go on about him forever. He saved my career in a way. I say in a way, but he did. When I came to him, I was in a horrible mental state. I was running through all the time. I could not get off the ground. I just had no confidence in what I was doing. And I went from being, a top recruit out of high school to, being someone that could barely clear, 3 feet lower than what I had cleared in high school. And so he really was just patient with me in a way that I think a lot of coaches don't have the time for. Most coaches, they need to win championships, and I totally get that. So it's hard for a coach to stay patient with an athlete like what I was going through when I didn't know why I was running through. I didn't know why, but everything felt wrong and off. And so he took the time, kept me on a really short approach to just build up my confidence in a way that I just don't think a lot of coaches would have done. And I think a lot of people were kind of telling him to let me quit and become maybe just like a sprinter for Ashland. And he stuck with me, and I built my confidence up. He helped me build my confidence up to where I'd been my senior year, improved by 1.5 feet from my personal best that I set in high school, and became a 2-time national champion and the D2 record holder. So I could talk about him forever and sing his praises all day, but he is, I'm sure, the only reason that I was able to keep going and got out of that mental block. So I owe him my career. Particularly this year, especially with feeling as bad as I did with COVID, there were a lot of nights of just laying up crying until 3, 4 in the morning, just dreading going to practice the next day. And I would try to go in as confidently as I could, but it's very defeating to go in and during a pole vault session just continue to run through and continue to feel bad. So yeah, there were a lot of nights of just crying and praying, hope, like, please, like, help me just to feel good on the runway again, even if I never clear a bar again, just to help me feel like I know what I'm doing. And so that this year, especially, there was just a lot of just laying up at night worrying, because it's a huge year. And coming off of having the best year of my life and jumping a personal best to now feeling like I can't even get off the ground and I don't know why. It was very unsettling. And my poor coach, he had a hard time with it too, because physically I was great. All my numbers were good on the runway. I was on bigger poles than I had ever been. And so it was just a very frustrating situation all around, because it's something that there wasn't a lot of information about either. So I know it's from COVID, but at the time you don't really hear people talking about the mental side of how it's affecting you. And that mind-body connection, that's what was so off. And so, yeah, that was what consumed a lot of my thoughts laying up at night. But thankfully we have kind of come full circle a little bit. And I would say we're back, but the pole vault will always give me anxiety and kind of scare me a little bit. So it'll never go away completely. But at least when I find myself getting anxious, I just go back to my cues and how I would think on the runway. And that kind of helps me calm down a little bit. Flattered and I'm humbled, but I've been very fortunate. I have a huge family. And so I feel like I've had that for a long time, which is so wonderful. That's a huge reason that I've been able to continue to do this, even when I wasn't sponsored, was I just had wonderful support. And, my dad and the Nageotte family is relatively well known in the Northeast, well, at least the Cleveland area, the Lakewood area. So I feel like I get people all the time that are like, I was friends with your dad, or I was friends with your uncle, and we're cheering for you. And it's just the coolest feeling. Just, you don't realize the reach that you have until you talk to someone that you had no idea who they were, but they know you. And it's very humbling. And I obviously want to do well for everyone that's cheering me on. Absolutely. I grew up watching the Olympics, and anytime someone from Team USA won, you just felt it. Like, you felt like you somehow were a part of that or helped, and so I I can't imagine having someone from the area then doing that well. I know what that felt like growing up, and so I would love to be able to do that. I don't want to jinx myself, knock on wood. There's a lot that can happen, and this was probably the most talented field of not just US vaulters, but international vaulters. So, one jump at a time, one day at a time, but I'm really excited, and to know that people are cheering for me, it helps me a lot. So I'm just grateful.